Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice Radio, and Unbroken Bonds is coming out. In fact, Unbroken Bonds should be out tomorrow, if this is uploaded on Thursday like planned. Otherwise, I'm assuming this goes out on Friday and it comes out today. Either way, ladies and gentlemen, Unbroken Bonds is coming out. And it is a phenomenal set. And it is also the largest set we have ever seen. So you probably need to have a little bit of a guide as to which cards are worth your time. So let's go, shall we? Here's the buy list. Couple of rules before we start. There may well be some cards that you think are really good and that you really want to make a deck around. If so, awesome. Go buy them. I'm trying to give you cards that you need to have in your binder because there is a very good chance that either you're going to want to put them in a deck or they are likely to increase in price. So they're the cards I think you really need to get at the beginning. You might really think that the new Slowpoke is awesome. And by Slowpoke I mean Slowbro. Great. Go and get yourself a playset. But I don't think you need to rush out and get a playset today. I think you can wait. And I think you can grab them later. Similarly, in terms of GXs, I'm not going to be asking you to get them or recommending that you get them unless I really think they are vital / going to jump in price. And there are a couple, unfortunately, that I do think you need to go and get. So something like Pheromosa and Buzzwole, I don't think that's going to be a dominant deck. It was very briefly in Japan, but in a format we're never going to have. So I don't think you need to run out and get these right away. Feel free to if you want to, but I'm not going to be recommending it. So let's go through then in set order with the buy list. I think you need 2 to 4 copies of GLOOM and 2 to 4 copies of VILEPLUME. And the reason here is extremely simple. GLOOM's got a really nice ability that puts Pokemon on your opponent's bench, and VILEPLUME's got a really nice ability that lets you choose a special condition. They may well end up in decks in the future, although they probably will stay cheap. I think you need 2 copies of KARTANA. This is a classic 1 copy in the deck card. For 1 grass energy, it does 130 damage if you've got 4 prizes remaining. If you're playing this in an Ultra Beast deck, if you're hitting for grass, weakness, etc., this is a really good card, so I do think you need a couple because this is a very techable card. I do think you need 4 copies of Reshiram and Charizard, and I'm sorry, I know it's going to be expensive, but this is going to be the best deck in the format as soon as it comes out. I don't see it going down in price anytime soon. You need 2 to 4 copies of VOLCANION because it is a really good starting Pokemon. 1 fire energy, search your deck for a fire energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. If you go second and it's your first turn, get 3 instead. But you can also do 110 for 2 energy. It's really good in fire decks. It's seeing a lot of play in Japan. And I'm going to be saying 2 to 4 copies for a bunch of these cards. The rule is really simple. If you just want 1 or 2 copies to help your deck, 2. If you want to build a deck around it, 4. That choice is yours, ladies and gentlemen. You need 2 copies of INCINEROAR because it means all your Pokemon do an extra 30 damage. This is the kind of Pokemon that's going to get teched into a whole bunch of decks. You need 2 to 4 copies of SALAZZLE. It is a new draw engine for fire decks. But also, it is a really good deck with Unknown Hand, and that's been really good in Japan, so you might need 4 copies if you want to go and play that. 4 copies of BLACEPHALON. It's a really good non-GX fire attacker. It is going to see some play, and it is going to see some love, and it's probably going to go up in value. 2 to 4 copies of DEWGONG. You can take out 2 60 HP Pokemon in 1 attack. This is the best version of Zoroark we're going to have when this comes out. It's a really good Pokemon. You need to go and get yourself a couple copies of it. You need 4 copies of KYUREM. It is automatic paralysis. You can use it with Naganadel and Quagsire, and it is just going to be a really good deck. And I do think you probably want 4 copies of these because there's a very good chance you'll want to play this deck. 2 to 4 copies of STUNFISK because you do 30 damage for each Pokemon you've got with damage counters on. It's really nice as an attacker. You need 2 or 3 copies of DEDENNE-GX, and I'm sorry, I know it's DEDENNE-GX, and I know it's not cheap, and I get it, and I apologize, but Tapu Lele's rotating out, and this is your turn 1, I've got consistency card. I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but you need 2 to 3 copies of this. Sorry. You need 4 copies of Charjabug and 4 copies of VIKAVOLT. Charjabug can be attached to a VIKAVOLT or VIKAVOLT-GX as a double lightning energy. This is going to be great for new VIKAVOLT in the future, but this is also going to be the only VIKAVOLT we've got, so yeah, you should probably have these just in case. 2 to 4 copies of WEEZING. The ability puts 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's basic Pokemon between turns. I can see this fitting into a whole bunch of decks. So, yeah, I think you need some of these. 2 copies of MEWTWO because it recovers your supporters. 2 copies of Mew because it protects your bench. Neither of those cards are going to be great attackers, but you need them to protect your bench. 2 to 4 copies of MISMAGIUS because you can KO it and draw until you got 7 cards in hand. This is going to be really good in a whole bunch of decks. It will add speed to the game. I really think you need 4 copies of this so you can just go. 2 copies of MARSHADOW because it is a good Buzzwole counter, while also being good at discarding stadiums. Bearing in mind we're losing Field Blower, so stadiums are going to be harder to get rid of. Make no mistake, this MARSHADOW is really good. You're going to need 4 copies of DIGLETT. When you discard it using Giovanni's Exile, discard the top card of your opponent's deck. Any deck that's playing Giovanni's Exile, you should consider whacking some DIGLETT in, so you should have 4 copies in your binder. 4 copies of LANDORUS. LANDORUS doesn't look great on the face of it, but it's a good low-energy fighting attacker, and it is seeing a lot of play over in Japan in a whole bunch of decks. Get 4 before the price goes up. 4 copies of Spiritomb. It's really good with the aforementioned STUNFISK, but it's also just really good because if you got 5 damage counters on, you do 160 for 1 energy. Kind of Pokemon you want hanging around. You don't necessarily have to, but I would recommend getting 1 copy of Lucario and Melmetal. The GX attack for 1 energy reduces damage done to all of your metal Pokemon by 30 for the rest of the game. So you're probably going to want to put 1 copy in any metal deck you ever play. And you need 2 copies of PERSIAN-GX. I'm sorry, I know it's a GX, but this is seeing a lot of play in a lot of decks over in Japan. It's got a really good attack. If you've got 8 Pokemon in the discard, you do 190 for free energy, or indeed 1 triple acceleration energy. But also, if you had a Pokemon EX or GX KO during your opponent's last turn, not by damage, just during their last turn, you can search for any 2 cards. It's really good, and it's seeing a lot of play. And then you need 4 copies of PORYGON-Z. We've already seen a couple of different decks in Japan using this. You can attach as many special energy during your turn as you like. I've seen 2 very different decks winning in Japan with this, and I think that's only the tip of the iceberg. You need 4 of these because this opens up so many deck building options. And in terms of trainers, you know my rule. I think you need a playset of all of them. The example I always use is AZ, which no one's going to play more than 1 or 2 copies of AZ. And then VILEPLUME got really popular and all VILEPLUME decks started playing 4 copies of AZ. I think you just need 4 copies in your binder in case. The one exception of which, and it is the only one I'm going to say is an exception here, Beastbringer. If it's attached to an Ultra Beast, and you got 6 prizes remaining, and you KO an EX or GX, you take an extra prize. It is only good in the early game, so I think you only need a couple of them. I then think you need 4 copies of Chip Chip Ice Axe. It's a little bit of disruption. It's kind of fun. 4 copies of Devolution Spray Z. It's the best way we've got to devolve at the moment. 4 copies of Dusk Stone. It only affects some Pokemon, but if you're playing any MISMAGIUS, Honchkrow Chandler, or Aegislash deck, this is over the top phenomenally amazing. Get yourself 4 of them. I think you are going to need 4 copies of Dust Island. In a poison deck, it's great. 4 copies of Electromagnetic Radar in any lightning deck that plays EX or GX Pokemon, like, I don't know, PIKAVOLT. Yeah, this is going to be pretty phenomenal. 4 copies of Energy Spinner, just because it's the only basic energy search we've got as an item. 4 copies of both Fairy Charm Ability and Fairy Charm Lightning. If you're playing a lightning deck, you might want to play these. Gives you immunity from the relevant Pokemon. 4 copies of Fire Crystal, great at recovering fire energy. 4 copies of Giovanni's Exile, discards undamaged bench Pokemon, especially in a format where we're not going to have Ace Roller to get Pokemon off the field. This could work quite nicely. And okay, it's undamaged, not damaged, but still, it's the best we've got. 4 copies of Janine. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put 2 of them in your hand, shuffle the rest back into your deck. That's pretty important. 4 copies of Green's Exploration. Don't know why I went out of order there, my apologies. This is phenomenal. Any deck that you're playing that doesn't have any Pokemon with abilities on the field, search for 2 trainer cards, put them in your hand. This is played in PORYGON-Z decks, which is all about the ability, just so you can search for rare candy. It is phenomenal, and it's a 4 of in a lot of decks in Japan. This is one of the very best cards in the set. You need it. 4 copies of KOGA'S Trap. It puts special abilities down. You might need it. 4 copies of Lieutenant Surge's Strategy. Now, if you're behind on prizes, you can play free supporter cards, including this one. Maybe you're not going to put this as a 4 of in that many decks, but you never know. You never know. 4 Martial Arts Dojo. If you're playing a deck that plays basic fighting energy, you do more damage. It's good. 4 Metal Core Barrier. Really good at reducing damage in metal decks. 4 Mullane lets you recover item cards, or trainer cards in fact, in metal decks. It's quite nice. Incidentally, you've got to discard 2 metal energy. Great combo here with Mount Coronet. Pick up 2 metal energy with Mount Coronet, discard them with Mullane. If you've got a Mount Coronet out, this just gets a trainer card back into your deck. It's awesome. 4 copies of Pokegear 3.0 to help search out stadiums, unless you've got them from you were playing back in Heart Gold Soul Silver like I do, in which case you don't need them. I got a bunch of these, but if you don't, you need to go and get 4 of them. They're great. 4 copies of Power Plant. This is the go-to stadium in a lot of decks because it turns off EX and GX abilities. Obviously, if you're relying on EX and GX abilities, don't, but you need 4 of them. 4 copies of Red's Challenge because it lets you search out any card. It's awesome. 4 copies of Samson Oak. This is a weak supporter, so you could ignore this one if you really wanted to. 4 copies of Stealthy Herd. It protects your Pokemon from abilities. You might want to put this on all of your Pokemon. 4 Surprise Box. Puts a card from your opponent's discard pile into their hand, clogs up their hand, and then you got all that stuff like Zoroark, which does more damage for each Pokemon in the discard pile. This will mean there's 1 fewer. It's fun. 2 to 4 copies of Ultra Beast Cart Envoy. This lets you go through any effects on the defending Pokemon. In a lot of decks you won't need it, in some you will. You could get away with 2 of these. You cannot get away with 2 Welder, go and get 4 Welder. It is a staple in every fire deck going forward. And 4 Triple Acceleration Energy, because when attached to an evolved Pokemon, it's free colorless energy. Well, alright, you discard it at the end of the turn, but it's free energy. Especially when double colorless energy is rotating out. This is ridiculous. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the entire buy list on the screen. It's quite long, but I'm sorry, there's a lot of really good cards. Obviously, if you really don't think you're going to want these, don't get them. And if there are other cards you think you're really going to want, get them. Personally, I'm going to be rushing out to buy 4 Charjabug and 4 Vikavolt, because that's the only deck I really want to play when Unbroken Bonds comes out. And I'm probably not going to go and get 4 non-GX Blacephalon, because I just don't want to play that deck. But that's me. It's up to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I think you need to give yourselves the options to make any really good deck when Unbroken Bonds comes out. So there we go. But as always, I'd like to hear your list. So do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice, especially if there are cards you don't think should be on there or cards that you think should be. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about games that don't have Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.